I was born 87 years ago. For 65 years, I've ruled as Tamriel's emperor. But for all these years, I've never been the ruler of my own dreams.
This opening is iconic. The portrayal of Uriel Septim by Patrick Stewart, the flyby of the Imperial City, and the music, all of these promise a remarkable adventure. This adventure was originally released in 2006, and at the time, what Oblivion brought to players was nigh revolutionary. But 19 years and practically half a dozen Skyrim releases later, does the magic of Oblivion still hold up? And more importantly, what can be learned from this remaster for future Elder Scrolls games? This video will be the first of two parts, and it'll focus primarily on the mechanics and features of the Oblivion Remastered. First and foremost, more than enough time has passed to declare that this game, as the title clearly states, is a remaster. Some early confusion caused implications that the game is a remake, and while there are some new features, the game is objectively still the original Oblivion at its core. Oh my god, why is he doing this? He's just exerting dominance. In fact, it could be argued that the remaster is the original Oblivion simply wrapped in Unreal Engine 5's graphics, since so much is retained. The character creator can still create freaks of nature or some sort of grizzled Chuck Norris. The camera still zooms in on character faces while talking to them, creating its own form of hilarity.
No.
Holy seizure. Put down the scuba, man. You're tripping out and turning transparent.
Will I be tormented with your image forever?
Much of the voice acting is the same, but new additions have been added to the cast for diversity's sake. Even much of the original silly bugs remain. Bye! What? What is it doing? It's doing a dance! What is it doing? Hold on. What are you doing? What is it? Yep. Classic Oblivion is back, everyone. And more importantly, all of the original Oblivion's DLC is included for the price of the base game. The Oblivion Remaster is a remaster with a few new additions, and past Oblivion players will certainly feel at home with the familiar features. Veteran players of Oblivion will recall numerous features that never made the transition to Skyrim. Sadly, most of these features directly played into highlighting the RPG genre of the series. These RPG features are presented to players from the very start of the game. Choosing or creating a class, selecting a specialization, and picking major attributes and skills are all key to the opening character creation of Oblivion. And while these features were removed in Skyrim, they've not only returned in the Oblivion Remaster, but they've been improved. Attributes more directly play a role into specific skills, such as agility affecting the damage of small weapons and bows. Skills have rebalanced and more unique perks at specific milestones when compared to the original Oblivion. Both of these add such a sense of freedom and depth to the creation of a character that it feels reminiscent of the RPG features in Morrowind. These features assist in making each character, each playthrough, feel unique. But these features have been dwindling since Morrowind. Diversity once present in Morrowind was lost in Oblivion, and what was in Oblivion lost in Skyrim. Acrobatics, athletics, hand-to-hand, the persuasion minigame, and spellcrafting are all features lost in the transition between Oblivion and Skyrim. And while some may seem silly, like athletics or the persuasion minigame, Others drastically limit players' ability to create unique characters and express themselves in the game world. Lightly armored thieves who jump to high vantage points to shoot down their foes should be able to run faster and jump higher and farther than a heavily armored warrior. How can a player play an unarmed monk character if hand-to-hand isn't a skill and viable form of combat? Proficient mages should be allowed to create unique and powerful spells, both as a reward for their skills in the arcane arts and as a means for players to freely explore the game's magic systems and mechanics. And although the persuasion minigame is silly, it is still more enjoyable than simply picking a dialogue option and running a basic skill check on speechcraft. Silly or serious, all of these skills and features added depth to the RPG genre that the Elder Scrolls series falls into. To remove these is to strip away the depth of a true RPG experience and be left with little more than an action-adventure game. The Oblivion Remaster is a nostalgic journey into the past of the Elder Scrolls series, and it is a reminder of just a piece of lost features that should be reinstated for players to experience the freedom that the RPG genre can provide. The Oblivion Remaster isn't just a nostalgic trip through RPG features in the Elder Scrolls of yore. It has brought innovations and improvements upon the original Oblivion. Besides the obvious improvements to graphical fidelity and details, which there are many small details to things like weapons, armor, and even the sky. The aurora over the northern mountains calls back to the night skies of Skyrim. Players will most quickly notice improvements in combat. The movements and flow of combat in the Oblivion Remaster is more fluid than previous titles, even Skyrim. Weapon types have more unique animations, befitting of how one may fight with them instead of sharing the same few swings like the original Oblivion's weapons did. However, it does appear that unlockable animations based upon reaching certain skill milestones have been removed. Although, Acrobatics' unlockable dodge mechanic has been retained and even moved to an earlier skill threshold. The dodge itself feels more responsive and enjoyable to use for lightly armored characters and agile thieves. It still, however, could use some iframes to make up for the colossal hitboxes and lock-on attacks that enemies seem to have. Despite some flaws, the combat feels more fluid and varied than before, and this may well be in part because of the return to the improvements upon the RPG elements of Oblivion. Having different attributes affect different weapon types allows for the various types of weapons to all be viable for their respective builds without one being objectively superior to the other. And along with the return and innovation upon these RPG attributes came an entirely new, albeit small, feature during character creation: origins. One of the first things a player will choose for their character is the origin. These are binary options related to the racial and regional upbringing of the character. However, the game doesn't overtly make it clear as to how they impact the character, so some may not realize their significance. The origin of a character gives a direct bonus to a specific attribute. The player will have to sift through menus during the character creation process to see exactly what is affected, but the effects are significant, especially for the early game. However, the early game may feel more brief than the original Oblivion did, at least in terms of player level. How skills impact leveling has been altered in the Oblivion Remaster. No longer do only major skills level a character. Now minor skills can also progress a character's level. This can rapidly increase the pace of the game by virtue of the enemy and equipment level scaling. And while the developers have stated that the level scaling is a hybrid of the original Oblivion's and Skyrim's level scaling, making it less jarring in the Oblivion Remaster, it is still present and can be quite noticeable when factoring in how quickly one can level due to the influence of minor skills. Running from dungeon to dungeon and then back to a city to sell loot a few times can easily result in a handful of levels in under a couple of hours. And this is while not factoring in fast travel. While playing most Elder Scrolls games, I tend to prefer to not use fast travel. The games are beautiful, and the Oblivion Remaster may be the most beautiful to date. Running through the world invites all sorts of experiences onto the player, and there will be a lot of running across the vast landscape if one opts to not use fast travel. Thankfully, sprinting has been added to the Oblivion Remaster, and despite the animation making every character look like a skooma addict, sprinting is one of a few positive features brought to the remaster from Skyrim. From Skyrim has also come spell tomes scattered throughout dungeon loot. Hitherto, in the original Oblivion, if one wanted to learn a spell, they would have to likely purchase it from a shop. Now, however, like in Skyrim, spell tomes can be found in the wild. While quite rare, they offer an alternative way of building mage characters via exploration. To further help with quests and exploration, the Clairvoyance spell from Skyrim has been added by default to players, and while exploring outside of combat, players' HP will recover automatically, just like in Skyrim. There are tons of little tweaks and changes, some carried over from Skyrim and some entirely new to the Oblivion Remaster, all for players to discover and learn. However, not all things discovered are positive, and there is still room for continued learning and improvement. Countless players have undoubtedly complained about the performance issues in the Oblivion Remaster. The most prominent issue is the stuttering and sudden frame drops that can occur. Even when stable frames are achieved, micro-stutters are still a potential problem. This is likely due to the Oblivion Remaster running in part on Unreal Engine 5. While the Unreal Engine does give the remaster its beautiful visuals, the engine itself is not known to be the most stable, and these micro-stutters are a common side effect of using it. Despite this, tweaking settings and having the proper PC specs can mitigate the performance issues, but then there are some additional issues in gameplay that are not so easy to overlook. The most obvious of these issues is the overall difficulty of the game. By default, the game is set to Adept difficulty, and while this is perfectly fine for some, many players, especially those already familiar with Oblivion from the original game, will find it far too easy. However, the increased difficulties are hardly the kind of challenge that players would want. The increased Expert and Master difficulties are an extremely unbalanced adjustment to damage received and dealt. Expert difficulty reduces the player's damage dealt to a little over a fourth of normal, while the damage received is more than tripled. This is further exacerbated to absurd degrees in Master difficulty, making every fight a slugfest against damage sponge enemies. However, while this is the case, I have still found Expert difficulty to be bearable, although there may be some rather tedious or outright silly combat moments. Certain character builds may also find some aspects of the combat tedious as well. A prime example of this are builds revolving around applying poisons. Just as in the original Oblivion and even Skyrim, there is no fluid and non-intrusive way to apply poisons to weapons consistently in the middle of a fight. Players are forced to go into menus and then apply the poison. This issue is then further exacerbated by another issue. Exiting the menu in the middle of a fight can cause the player character to momentarily freeze. Even if the player were to set a poison to one of the radial hotkeys and avoid the menu, there's still a text box that appears asking to confirm the use of the poison, interrupting the flow of combat. The radial hotkeys as well are limited, and they fill up fast when considering that most players have weapons, spells, and potentially potions set to them. All of the menu management can take players out of what is otherwise decently fluid combat. Of course, this is not new or isolated to the Oblivion Remaster, but it is instead a continued gripe applied to multiple Elder Scrolls games. The release of the Oblivion Remaster has given players the opportunity to reflect on the trajectory of the Elder Scrolls series, primarily through comparing Skyrim and Oblivion. The Oblivion Remaster's revival of past RPG elements is a reminder of features that could be returned for future iterations of the series. The fact that the original Oblivion's attribute system has been reworked to better consider the game's different weapons is a positive sign that the weapon variety lost between Morrowind to Oblivion and Oblivion to Skyrim may be returned at a future point. The weapon variety is simply an example of what players expect and want from an RPG series like the Elder Scrolls. Variety. A great deal of variety has been lost between each game in the Elder Scrolls series. While I may be in the minority for enjoying and wanting the return of the Persuasion Wheel minigame and the breaking and repairing of equipment, the latter, if only for the ability to disintegrate enemies' equipment, I am likely in the vast majority for also wanting a return of attributes, removed skills, spellcrafting, and all the weapon variety that has been taken over time. This isn't to simply say that all things Oblivion are superior to Skyrim, or that Skyrim lacks valuable additions to the series. On the contrary, Skyrim has offered a plethora of features that, not existing in the Oblivion Remaster, are sorely missed when absent. Most notably absent is the ability to dual-wield weapons. This, only being introduced in Skyrim, was not present in the original Oblivion, thus nor is it present in the Oblivion Remaster, but it illustrates the same point. Variety is key in the RPG genre. The variety that Skyrim brought, in crafting weapons and armor, a feature that complements repairing well, in cooking food, a complement to the alchemy skill tree perks, further developing Oblivion's original skill milestones, in acquiring spells through magic tomes, in using hold spells versus single cast spells, greatly innovating from clunkier touch spells, and even in the addition of special kill animations. All of these features added their own variety to Skyrim. It is a shame, however, that these features came at the cost of Oblivion's features that were more core to the RPG genre. Yet, were all of these to be brought back, combined and improved upon in a future Elder Scrolls game, then Bethesda would truly be learning from the successes of their past games. And what is it that should be learned from these past successes? Much discussed here is revolved around identifying the Elder Scrolls series as RPG games and emphasizing the variety that these RPG elements bring to each game in the series. But the RPG features and variety are a means to an end. That end is the creation of a living world that offers players vast amounts of freedom to fully express themselves in the creation of their characters and the actions they take throughout the game. Both freedom and variety offer replayability to games, and for an RPG, it offers players the means of making each playthrough and character a unique expression of themselves. Moving forward, the Elder Scrolls series shouldn't chip away at the RPG features it has. It should innovate and improve upon them. The Oblivion Remaster has done this with its old features, but it could still be further improved upon. The separation of weapon-type damage across the strength and agility attributes is a good first start. but most players will still end up leveling up their strength attribute regardless of build, simply because carrying encumbrance is attached to it. This again could make certain weapon types and attributes objectively outshine others due to the additional benefits attached to them. Of course, this is just an example of where continued improvement and consideration can be applied to bettering the RPG system of the series, but that is the direction that the series should move towards, offering variety and freedom to players with features and choices via innovating and improving upon the features that were previously less popular, instead of removing them altogether. And let it not be forgotten that mods exist to often reinstate that which is lost. The modding community for Bethesda games, especially the Elder Scrolls series, is unmatched. The years of longevity added to these games via modded content, tweaks, fixes, and more is a treasure trove of data for Bethesda to draw upon for inspiration and to see what the community wants. And it is this that Bethesda can learn from its community with the Oblivion Remaster's release. The community is there to guide developers towards what players want through what they play, and developers should look at what has been successful to improve and innovate upon what has not been successful, instead of simply removing it from future games. Many of the old features from the original Oblivion, now returned to the Oblivion Remastered, would complement just as many of the newer features from Skyrim. Hopefully, this merging of old and new and learning from the past can be a step taken with future entries into the Elder Scrolls series, so that even though the past games may remain nostalgic memories, their features will live on in the innovations they provide for the future. Feel free to discuss which features in the Elder Scrolls games, especially the Oblivion Remaster, you've enjoyed the most in the comments below. Open discussion is a valuable asset to innovation for any part of a game's development, and while this video focused entirely on features and mechanics, the second part of this analysis will focus on the narrative, storytelling, and quests of the Oblivion Remaster. So stay tuned for that, and thank you for watching.